Commander Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation window. Below her, Earth was dying. Red flames covered the continents like a deadly disease. The blue oceans that once sparkled with life now reflected the orange glow of burning cities. "Commander, we have incoming signals from the European defense grid," Lieutenant Torres called from his station. His voice shook with fear. Sarah turned away from the terrible sight below. "Put it through." The communication screen flickered to life. A woman's face appeared, streaked with dirt and blood. Behind her, explosions lit up the darkness. "This is General Martinez from Berlin Command. We cannot hold them any longer. The crystal ships are everywhere. They are killing everyone." Sarah's heart sank. Berlin was their strongest fortress. If it was falling, then nowhere on Earth was safe. "How long do you have?" Sarah asked. "Maybe an hour, maybe less." Martinez looked directly at Sarah through the screen. "Commander, you are our last hope. If Luna Station falls, humanity dies with it." The screen went black. Sarah stared at the empty display for a long moment. Around her, the bridge of Luna Station buzzed with activity. Her crew worked at their stations, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They all knew the truth. They were the last humans left alive in space. The war had started 30 years ago when the Kethvar first arrived. These beings looked like living crystals that could change shape at will. They had ships that could destroy entire planets. They believed that all life made of flesh and blood was evil and had to be destroyed. At first, humanity fought back with everything they had. Earth's great fleets met the Kethvar in the space between stars. For a while, it seemed like they might win. Human ships were fast and clever. Human pilots were brave and would not give up. But the Kethvar had too many ships. For every one they destroyed, 10 more came to take its place. Slowly, the human colonies fell. First the outer worlds, then the core systems. Mars was evacuated last month. The great shipyards of Jupiter were blown apart 2 weeks ago. Now only Earth remained, and it was dying. "Commander," Torres shouted. "New contacts coming out of hyperspace. It's them. It's the main fleet." Sarah looked at the tactical display. Hundreds of red dots appeared around Earth. Each dot was a Kethvar warship the size of a city. She had never seen so many enemy ships in one place. "Sir, Admiral Zixthan is sending us a message," the communications officer said. "Let's hear what the monster has to say," Sarah replied. The main screen filled with the image of a tall, crystal being. Its body was clear like diamond, but dark energy swirled inside it. When it spoke, its voice sounded like breaking glass. "Human Commander," Admiral Zixthan said, "your species has fought well, but now you must accept reality. Surrender your station and we will make your death quick. Continue to resist and we will make you suffer." Sarah stepped forward. "This is Commander Chen of Luna Station. My answer is the same it has always been. Go to hell." The crystal being's eyes flared with anger. "Then you will die slowly, just like the rest of your kind." The transmission ended. Around the bridge, Sarah's crew looked at her with a mixture of fear and hope. These men and women had served with her for years. They trusted her to lead them through anything. "All hands, this is the commander," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "The enemy is here in great numbers. They want us to surrender. They want us to give up everything our species has ever fought for. But we are humans. We do not give up. We fight until the end." The crew cheered, but Sarah could hear the fear underneath their brave words. They all knew this was their last battle. The attack began 10 minutes later. Beams of purple energy lanced out from the Kethvar ships. Luna Station's shields flared as they absorbed the punishment. Sarah's gunners fired back with everything they had. Missile after missile streaked toward the enemy fleet, but there were too many of them. For every shot Luna Station fired, the Kethvar returned 100. Slowly, the station's shields began to fail. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone shouted. "Fire in the engine room," called another voice. Sarah watched as her ship died around her. Good people were giving their lives to buy just a few more minutes of resistance. She thought about all the humans who had died in this war. Billions of people who would never see their families again. Children who would never grow up. All because the Kethvar believed life was evil. "Commander," Torres said quietly, "I'm getting reports from Earth. The last defense stations have gone silent. London, Tokyo, New York. They're all gone." Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she saw that the main screen still showed Earth below them. But now there were no lights on the night side of the planet. No cities shining in the darkness. Just fire and death. "Sir, we've lost main power," the engineer reported. "Backup systems are failing. We have maybe 5 minutes before life support shuts down. Sarah looked around the bridge one last time. These brave people had followed her into hell itself. The least she could do was give them hope in their final moments. My friends, she said softly. We may be the last humans in the universe, but we are still humans. We choose how our story ends. We choose to fight for what we believe in, even when there is no hope of victory. Even when we know we are going to die. The HFY ships moved closer. Sarah could see them through the observation windows now, crystal predators closing in for the kill. Torres, do we still have communications? Yes, sir. Emergency power only. Good. Open a channel to all frequencies. If there are any humans left alive anywhere, I want them to hear this. Torres nodded and activated the communication system. Sarah took a deep breath. This is Commander Sarah Chen of Luna Station. I am probably the last human with the ability to speak to the stars. Our world is gone. Our people are gone. But I want the universe to remember us. We were human. We loved our families. We protected the weak. We reached for the stars because we believed in something greater than ourselves. The station shuddered as another HFY blast tore through the hull. We may have lost this war, but we never stopped being human. We never stopped fighting for what was right. And if there is any justice in this universe, our sacrifice will mean something. The lights on the bridge flickered and went out. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows for humanity, Sarah whispered. For home. The final blast tore Luna Station apart. Sarah Chen, the last human being in the universe, died with her ship. But deep beneath Earth's oceans, something heard her final words. Something that had been sleeping for millions of years began to stir. Ancient systems that had waited since the dawn of time started to wake up. The HFY thought they had won. They thought they had destroyed the last threat to their crystal empire. They were wrong. Earth was about to show them what real power looked like. Admiral Zix then watched the pieces of Luna Station drift through space. The last human stronghold was now nothing but scattered metal and frozen air. The crystalline being felt satisfaction flow through his diamond-hard body. After 30 years of war, the humans were finally extinct. All ships begin harvesting operations, he commanded his fleet. Strip this world of everything useful. When we are done, there will be no trace that organic life ever existed here. The HFY ships moved toward Earth like hungry wolves. Their mining beams began cutting into the planet's surface, searching for metals and rare elements. Earth had no defenses left, no weapons to stop them. It was just a dead rock now. But deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, something disagreed. In the deepest parts of the sea floor where no human had ever traveled, ancient machines began to wake up. These devices were older than human civilization, older than the dinosaurs. They had been placed there by beings who lived on Earth millions of years before humans even existed. The machines had one simple job: protect Earth's children. For countless ages, they had watched and waited. They had seen ice ages come and go. They had watched as life crawled out of the sea and learned to walk on land. They had observed as small mammals grew larger and smarter, eventually becoming the creatures called humans. The machines were programmed to activate only when Earth's dominant species faced complete extinction. They had stayed silent through wars and disasters, through the rise and fall of empires. But now, with the death of Sarah Chen, the last human was gone. The trigger had been pulled. Deep in the Mariana Trench, a structure the size of a mountain began to glow with blue light. The water around it started to bubble and steam as massive amounts of energy flowed through circuits that had been sleeping for millions of years. On the surface, the HFY detected the strange energy readings. Admiral, one of his officers reported, we are seeing unusual activity from the planet's ocean floors. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Zix then studied the readings on his command display. The numbers made no sense. Nothing on a dead planet should be generating this much power. Probably some kind of volcanic activity, he decided. The humans may have damaged the planet's core during their final battles. Continue harvesting operations, but the officer's eyes widened as he watched his instruments. Sir, the energy is increasing, and it's focused. This is not natural. Before the Admiral could respond, the ocean began to move. The first thing that broke the surface was a hand. But it was not a human hand. It was massive, larger than a HFY battleship. The hand was made of metal that seemed to flow like liquid, but held its shape like the strongest steel. Blue energy ran through it like glowing veins. The hand was followed by an arm, then a shoulder. The ocean boiled and churned as something unimaginably huge pulled itself up from the deepest parts of the sea. The being that emerged was beautiful and terrible. Its body was tall as a mountain, but moved with the grace of a dancer. Its skin was made of living metal that shifted and changed color with each movement. Its eyes were like twin stars burning with the light of creation itself. The Kethvar fleet opened fire immediately. Purple energy beams that could destroy cities struck the giant being. The blast hit its chest and arms, lighting up the area with brilliant explosions. When the light faded, the being was completely unharmed. The metal skin had absorbed every bit of energy and turned it into something else. The giant's eyes grew brighter, as if the Kethvar attacks had only made it stronger. Admiral Zixthan stared in shock. "What is that thing?" The being looked up at the Kethvar fleet floating above Earth's atmosphere. When it spoke, its voice was like thunder rolling across the sky, but somehow every living creature in the galaxy could understand its words. "I am the Ocean Guardian," it said. "I am the protector of this world and all life upon it. You have murdered my children. You have burned their homes. You have silenced their voices forever." The Guardian reached down and touched the surface of the ocean. The water began to glow with the same blue energy that flowed through its body. Waves started to form, but these were not normal waves. They moved upward, defying gravity, reaching toward the Kethvar ships in space. "For 30 years I watched your war," the Guardian continued. "I saw brave humans fight and die to protect their world. I saw children crying for parents who would never come home. I felt every death like a wound in my heart." The waves of energy-charged water struck the nearest Kethvar ships. The alien vessels, which had been designed to survive in the vacuum of space, were crushed like toys. Water that should have boiled away in the emptiness between stars instead wrapped around the ships like living chains. "I waited because that was my programming," the Guardian said. "I could not act while any of my children still lived. But now the last human has fallen. Now there is nothing to stop me from doing what I was created to do." More Kethvar ships fired at the Guardian. Missiles and energy beams filled the space around Earth, but every attack was turned aside or absorbed. The Guardian's metal skin adapted to each new weapon, becoming stronger with every shot. "Admiral," one of Zixthan's officers screamed. "The ocean is rising! It's coming up into space!" Impossible as it seemed, the Earth's oceans were flowing upward like a vast blue fountain. The Guardian was calling the water to itself, turning the seas into a weapon. Tendrils of ocean water reached out like grasping fingers, pulling Kethvar ships down toward the planet's surface. But the Ocean Guardian was not alone. In North America, the ground began to shake. The Rocky Mountains split open, and something even larger began to climb out. This Guardian was made of living stone and molten metal. Its body was rough and angular, like a mountain that had learned to walk. When it stood to its full height, its head reached into the clouds. "I am the Mountain Guardian," it announced, its voice like an earthquake. "The bones of this world are my body. The fire in its heart is my blood." The Mountain Guardian reached down and picked up a chunk of the Rocky Mountains. It hurled the massive stone into space like a baseball. The improvised missile struck a Kethvar ship and smashed it into pieces. In South America, the Amazon rainforest began to glow with green light. Trees that had stood for centuries suddenly grew taller, their branches reaching toward the sky. From the heart of the jungle, a third Guardian emerged. This one was different from the others. Its body seemed to be made of pure light, green and gold and silver. Where it walked, flowers bloomed and trees grew, but its eyes held the fury of a storm. "I am the Forest Guardian," it said, and its voice was like wind through leaves. "I am life itself. I am growth and renewal in the endless cycle of birth and death." The Forest Guardian raised its hands toward the Kethvar fleet. Vines made of pure energy reached out into space, wrapping around enemy ships. But these vines did not destroy. Instead, they began to change the ships, turning crystal into wood, metal into leaves. Admiral Zixthan watched in horror as his mighty fleet was dismantled by 3 impossible beings. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were being treated like toys by creatures that should not exist. "All ships, retreat," he commanded. "Fall back to the edge of the system." But when his ships tried to activate their faster-than-light engines, nothing happened. The space around Earth had changed. Reality itself was different here now. The Guardians had trapped the entire Kethvar fleet. "There is no escape," the Ocean Guardian said. Its voice reached every ship in the fleet. "You came here to end life. Now life will end you." The 3 Guardians moved closer together, their massive forms creating a triangle around Earth. Energy flowed between them, connecting them in a pattern of power that hurt to look at directly. You thought this world was defenseless, the mountain guardian rumbled. You thought its children were weak. You were wrong, the forest guardian added. This world has been protected since the dawn of time. We are its immune system. We are its antibodies against the disease of hatred. And now, all three guardians spoke in unison, we will show you what happens to those who threaten our children. The energy connecting the three beings began to spread outward, reaching toward every Kethvar ship. Admiral Zix then realized with growing terror that this was not just a battle. This was an execution. His crystal empire, which had seemed so powerful just hours ago, was about to face the true guardians of Earth. The three guardians stood around Earth like ancient gods awakened from sleep. Admiral Zix then had conquered entire galaxies, but he had never seen anything like these beings. They moved with power that bent the laws of physics. They spoke with voices that could be heard across space itself. What are you? He transmitted to them, his crystal voice shaking with fear. The Ocean Guardian turned its star-bright eyes toward the Kethvar Admiral. We are what we have always been, the protectors of life, the guardians of growth, the enemies of those who would destroy rather than create. More guardians began to emerge from Earth's surface. From the ice fields of Antarctica came a being of pure white light, its body crackling with the power of winter storms. From the deserts of Africa rose a guardian that seemed to be made of golden sand and blazing sunlight. Each one was different, shaped by the environment it had protected for millions of years. But the guardians were not just warriors. They were keepers of memory. As the beings moved across Earth's surface, something strange happened. The ground they touched began to glow with soft blue light. This light spread outward like ripples on a pond covering continents and oceans. Wherever the light went, the damage from the Kethvar attacks began to heal. Burned cities started to rebuild themselves. Dead forests grew back in minutes. The poisoned oceans cleared and began to sparkle with clean water again. But more than that, something else was returning to Earth. The humans were coming back. Not in their physical bodies. Those were gone forever. But their minds, their memories, their souls were still there. Earth itself had been recording every human life since the species first appeared. Every thought, every dream, every moment of love and hope had been stored in the planet's quantum field. Now the Guardians were awakening those stored minds. In the ruins of New York, ghostly figures began to appear. Translucent humans walked through the streets, rebuilding their city with hands made of pure thought. A mother picked up her child, both of them glowing with inner light. Soldiers who had died fighting the Kethvar stood again, their wounds healed, their purpose renewed. Sarah Chen materialized on the bridge of a new Luna station that grew from the moon's surface like a silver flower. She looked at her hands in wonder. They were not flesh and blood anymore, but something far more resilient. She was consciousness given form, thought made real. "Commander," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Torres, his face bright with joy. "We're alive. Somehow we're alive." All around Earth, billions of humans were awakening, but they were not the same as they had been in life. They were something new, something better. They had kept their memories and personalities, but now they were connected to Earth itself. They could feel the planet's heartbeat. They could sense every living thing. Admiral Zix then watched this resurrection with growing terror. This is impossible. Dead beings cannot return to life. The Forest Guardian's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Death is just a word that organic minds use when they do not understand the true nature of existence. Energy cannot be destroyed, only changed. Your kind never learned this truth. The Guardian raised its hand toward the Kethvar fleet. Every world you have conquered, every species you have destroyed, they are all still here. Still waiting, still remembering. Suddenly, space around Earth began to fill with new lights. Points of brilliance appeared in the darkness, growing larger and brighter. They were ships, but not like any ships the Kethvar had ever seen. These vessels seemed to be alive, their hulls flowing like liquid metal, their engines burning with the light of stars. The ships were crewed by the awakened consciousness of every human who had ever lived. Ancient cave painters stood beside modern scientists. Medieval knights worked alongside space pilots. All of humanity, from the dawn of the species to its apparent end, had returned to fight for their world, but they were not alone. As the new human fleet moved to surround the Kethvar ships, other fleets began to arrive. ships that belonged to species the Kethvar had destroyed centuries ago. The blue-skinned Veltar, who had been wiped out 50 years earlier, the insect-like Zitharon, whose worlds had been burned 100 years ago, the plant people of Verdania, who had been extinct for 2 centuries. "No," Admiral Zixthan whispered. "We destroyed you. All of you. You are dead." A new voice spoke across the communication channels. It belonged to Sarah Chen, but now her words carried the power of Earth itself. "We were never dead," she said. "Every world that supports life has guardians like these. Every planet remembers its children. You thought you were conquering empty rocks, but you were really murdering the children of living worlds." The Ocean Guardian stepped forward, each movement causing tsunamis to flow through space itself. "For too long we slept while you spread your poison across the galaxy. We watched you kill and destroy, and we did nothing because we were bound by ancient laws. We could not act until our children faced complete extinction. But now," the Mountain Guardian added, its voice shaking the very fabric of space, "those laws no longer apply. Now we are free to do what we should have done long ago." The Forest Guardian spread its arms wide, and energy flowed from its body toward every ship in the human fleet. The vessels began to glow with the same power that flowed through the Guardians themselves. "You wanted to cleanse the galaxy of organic life," the Guardian said. "Instead, you have awakened something that will cleanse the galaxy of you." The battle that followed was like nothing the universe had ever seen. The Kethvar ships, powerful as they were, could not stand against enemies who had been touched by the power of the Guardians. Human vessels moved like living things, their hulls flowing around enemy attacks, their weapons firing beams of pure life energy that turned crystal into dust. But this was not just revenge. It was transformation. When the Guardian weapons struck Kethvar ships, they did not always destroy. Sometimes they changed. Crystal beings found their hard bodies becoming soft and flexible. Their thoughts, which had been cold and logical, began to include new feelings: empathy, compassion, love. Some Kethvar fought against these changes, preferring death to what they saw as corruption. But others welcomed the transformation. They had spent so long hating life that they had forgotten what it felt like to truly live. Admiral Zixthan watched his empire crumble around him. Ships that had served him for decades turned against their own kind. Crews that had been loyal crystal warriors were becoming something new, something that valued life instead of destroying it. "Stop this," he transmitted to the Guardians. "We surrender. We will leave this system and never return." The Ocean Guardian's reply was final. "There is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from us now. Every world you have touched is awakening. Every species you have killed is returning. The age of the Kethvar is over." But even as the Admiral faced the end of everything he had believed in, the Forest Guardian offered hope. "You do not have to die," it said. "You can choose to change. You can choose to become something better than what you are. The choice is yours." Zixthan looked at his reflection in the polished surface of his command console. His crystal body was beginning to glow with warm light instead of cold fire. He could feel something growing inside him, something he had never experienced before. It was the ability to care about others. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Zixthan began to understand what he had lost when his people chose the path of destruction. And for the first time he began to wonder if it was not too late to find it again. Earth's children had returned, and they were offering their enemies something the Kethvar had never given to anyone else. They were offering forgiveness. The transformation of Admiral Zixthan was just the beginning. Across the Kethvar fleet, crystal beings were changing. Their hard, cold bodies began to soften and warm. Their thoughts, which had known only the desire to destroy, now included new feelings they could not understand. But the Guardians were not finished. The Ocean Guardian reached out with its massive hand and touched the surface of space itself. Reality rippled like water, and suddenly the Guardian was somewhere else entirely. It stood in the Kethvar home system, among the crystal spires and geometric cities that the aliens had built on their homeworld. The Mountain Guardian appeared in another system, on a world that had once been green and beautiful before the Kethvar turned it into a mining operation. The Forest Guardian materialized near a space station where Kethvar scientists conducted experiments on captured life forms. They were not alone. As each Guardian arrived, they brought with them the awakened consciousness of the species that had once lived in these places. The galaxy was filling with the ghosts of murdered civilizations, all of them seeking justice. On the Kethvar homeworld, crystal beings looked up in terror as the Ocean Guardian's shadow fell across their cities. The being was even larger here than it had been at Earth, its form stretching from the planet's surface to its upper atmosphere. "We are the children of the worlds you destroyed," the Guardian spoke, its voice reaching every crystal ear. "We are the voices you silenced. We are the dreams you crushed, and now we have returned." The Kethvar military tried to fight back. They launched their most powerful weapons at the Guardian. Bombs that could crack moons exploded harmlessly against its flowing metal skin. Energy beams that could boil oceans were absorbed and converted into healing light. But the Guardian did not respond with violence. Instead, it knelt down and placed one enormous finger on the ground. Where it touched, something impossible happened. Grass began to grow. Green shoots pushed up through the crystal pavement of Kethvar cities. Flowers bloomed in patterns of red and yellow and blue. Trees sprouted from the geometric buildings, their roots breaking apart the cold architecture and replacing it with living wood. The Kethvar screamed in horror. To them, organic life was a disease. Seeing their perfect crystal world infected with plants and growing things was like watching their worst nightmare come true. But as the transformation continued, something unexpected happened. Some of the Kethvar stopped screaming. They began to stare at the flowers in wonder. The colors were so bright, so warm. The smell of growing grass was sweet and clean. For the first time in their existence, they experienced beauty that was not cold and geometric. These Kethvar began to change too. Their crystal bodies developed streaks of green and brown. Their thoughts became less sharp and more flowing. They were becoming something new, part crystal, part organic, completely different from what they had been before. On other worlds across the galaxy, the same process was happening. The Mountain Guardian was breaking apart Kethvar mining operations and replacing them with gardens. The Forest Guardian was freeing captured creatures and helping them rebuild their homes. But the real shock came when the Guardians reached the edge of Kethvar space. There, in a system that no one had visited for 1,000 years, they found something that changed everything. It was the original Kethvar homeworld, the planet where the crystal beings had first evolved. And it was not a crystal world at all. It was green, ancient forests covered the continents. Blue oceans sparkled under a yellow sun. And in the deepest parts of the world, sleeping in crystal caves, were the original Kethvar. They were not the cold, geometric beings that had spread across the galaxy. They were smaller, softer, with bodies that mixed crystal and organic matter in beautiful patterns. The Ocean Guardian stood on the shore of an ancient sea and spoke to the sleeping beings. "Awaken, children of two natures. Remember what you once were before fear made you forget." The original Kethvar opened their eyes. They had been sleeping for millennia, hidden away by their own descendants who had been ashamed of their mixed nature. When they saw the Guardians, they wept tears of liquid crystal. "We remember," one of them said. "We remember when we were whole, when we loved both the crystal and the flesh, when we built cities that grew like trees and sang like birds." The Guardian reached down and touched the ancient being gently. "Tell us what happened. Tell us how your children became destroyers." The story that emerged was tragic. Long ago, the original Kethvar had been explorers and gardeners. They had spread across the galaxy not to conquer, but to plant new life and help other species grow. Their mixed nature, part crystal, part organic, had made them perfect ambassadors between different kinds of life. But then they had encountered something terrible. A plague that attacked their organic parts, threatening to destroy their entire species. In desperation, they had tried to make themselves purely crystal, cutting away all their organic components. The process had worked to save their lives, but it had cost them their souls. Without their organic parts, they could no longer feel empathy or love. They became cold and logical, seeing organic life as a threat to be eliminated rather than a treasure to be protected. "We tried to stop them," the ancient Kethvar explained, "but they would not listen. They said we were weak and diseased. They locked us away and went out into the galaxy to cleanse it of the very thing that had once made us whole." The Forest Guardian knelt beside the ancient being. "The plague is gone now. It died out millions of years ago. Your children have been fighting a war against an enemy that no longer exists." Back in the main Kethvar fleet, Admiral Zixthon felt something shift inside his mind. Memories that had been locked away for generations began to surface. He remembered stories his grandmother had told him about the ancient times, about Kethvar who could sing to plants and make them grow, about crystal beings who had loved the warmth of living things. He looked at his hands and saw that they were changing. Green veins ran through the crystal like tiny rivers. His heart, which had been a cold geometric shape, was becoming warmer and more organic. "What is happening to me?" he asked. Sarah Chen's voice reached him across the communication channels. She had been watching the transformation of the Kethvar with a mixture of sadness and hope. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be," she said. "Your people were never meant to be destroyers. They were meant to be gardeners of the galaxy, helping life grow wherever they went." The Admiral looked around his ship and saw that his crew was changing too. Crystal beings were developing patches of organic material. Their movements were becoming less rigid and more flowing. Some of them were crying, though they had never cried before in their lives. "We have done terrible things," Zixthon said. "We have killed so many. How can you forgive us?" "Because we understand now," Sarah replied. "You were not evil. You were sick. Your people cut away the parts of themselves that could feel love and compassion, thinking it would make them stronger. Instead, it made them afraid of the very thing they had lost." Across the galaxy, the transformation continued. Kethvar worlds were being reborn as garden planets where crystal and organic life grew together in harmony. The awakened consciousness of destroyed species worked alongside changing Kethvar to rebuild what had been lost. But the greatest change was happening inside the Kethvar themselves. As their organic parts returned, they began to remember what they had been fighting against all these years. It was not an external enemy. It was the fear of their own nature. Admiral Zixthon stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at Earth. The planet was glowing with new life, more beautiful than it had ever been. The Guardians stood around it like protective parents, their massive forms radiating peace and power. "What do we do now?" he asked. The Ocean Guardian's answer reached every being in the galaxy. "Now we begin again. Now we build a galaxy where crystal and flesh, logic and emotion, order and chaos can exist together in harmony. Now we become what the universe always intended us to be. We become gardeners of life itself." 1 year after the awakening, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Where once there had been Kethvar crystal cities that cut into planets like wounds, now there were garden worlds where living buildings grew from the ground itself. Trees made of crystal and wood reached toward the stars, their leaves shining with inner light. Rivers of liquid energy flowed between cities that breathed like living things. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Luna Station and watched the transformation with wonder. The station itself was alive now, its corridors lined with biometal that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Through its transparent walls, she could see Earth below, more beautiful than it had ever been in human history. The planet's continents were covered with forests that seemed to glow from within. The oceans sparkled with life forms that had never existed before, creatures that were part organic, part energy, all beautiful. Cities had grown like coral reefs, their buildings shaped by the dreams and needs of their inhabitants rather than by cold engineering. "It's hard to believe this is the same world the Kethvar tried to destroy," said Lieutenant Torres, joining Sarah at the observation window. Like all humans now, his body was a perfect fusion of consciousness and matter. He could exist as pure thought when he wanted to travel between stars, or take physical form when he needed to touch and build. "It's not the same world," Sarah replied. "It's what Earth was always meant to become. The Guardians told me that this was always the plan. Every world in the galaxy was supposed to evolve this way, becoming a living partner with its inhabitants rather than just a resource to be used." Below them, one of the Guardians was teaching a group of transformed Kethvar how to sing to plants. The crystal beings, now streaked with green and gold organic matter, hummed in harmonies that made flowers bloom in complex patterns. Their teacher was the Forest Guardian, but it had changed too. It was smaller now, more personal. It could take a form that allowed it to work closely with individuals rather than reshaping entire planets. "Sarah," Torres said quietly, "do you ever miss being human? I mean really human, with flesh and blood and all the limitations that came with it?" Sarah considered the question. She could remember what it had felt like to be purely organic, the constant need for food and sleep, the way injuries caused pain, the knowledge that death was always waiting. Sometimes, she admitted, there was something pure about that existence. Every moment mattered because we knew it could be our last. Every choice had weight because we couldn't take it back. She gestured toward Earth. But look what we've become. We can travel between stars as easily as walking across a room. We can feel the emotions of every living thing on a planet. We can create new forms of life just by imagining them. A new voice joined the conversation. It belonged to Admiral Zixthan, who had become one of Sarah's closest advisors in the new galactic government. His crystal body was now shot through with veins of living wood, and his eyes held a warmth that would have been impossible in his purely crystal form. "The question is not what we have lost," he said, "but what we have gained. My people spent 1,000 years trying to eliminate weakness from ourselves. We cut away everything soft, everything vulnerable, everything that could feel pain." He held up his hand, and small flowers bloomed from his crystalline palm. "We thought this would make us strong. Instead, it made us into machines. We could conquer worlds, but we could not appreciate their beauty. We could destroy life, but we could not create it." Sarah nodded. "The Guardians showed us that strength and vulnerability are not opposites. They are partners. True power comes from embracing both." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's communication system. A new message was coming in from the Galactic Exploration Fleet. These were the ships that humanity and the transformed Cathvar had built together, vessels that could travel to the edge of known space and beyond. "Commander Chen," the message began, "this is Captain Williams of the exploration ship New Harmony. We have discovered something extraordinary in the Andromeda Galaxy. We have found other Guardians." Sarah's eyes widened. The Guardians of Earth had told them that every life-bearing world was supposed to have protectors, but they had assumed that most of them were still sleeping. "The Guardians here are awake," Captain Williams continued. "They have been fighting a war against something called the Void Seekers, beings that consume the life energy of entire systems. The Guardians are losing. They need our help." Sarah looked at Torres and Zixthan. All three of them were thinking the same thing. The galaxy was healed, but the universe was much larger than just one galaxy. "It seems our work is not finished," she said. The Ocean Guardian's voice reached them from the planet below. It had heard the message and was already preparing for action. The awakening that began on Earth was meant to spread. The Guardian said, "We are the antibodies of life itself. When one world awakens, it must help others to awaken as well. This is the purpose we were created for." Within hours, the largest fleet in galactic history was assembled. Ships crewed by awakened humans worked alongside vessels piloted by transformed Cathvar. The Guardians themselves took the form of massive beings that could travel between galaxies, their bodies becoming living ships for the smaller vessels. But they were not going to Andromeda as conquerors. They were going as healers and teachers. Each ship carried seeds from the garden worlds of their own galaxy. Each crew member had learned how to sing the songs that made planets bloom with life. They brought with them the knowledge of how to awaken sleeping Guardians and how to transform destroyers into gardeners. As the fleet prepared to depart, Sarah stood once more on the observation deck of her station. Earth hung below her like a jewel, more beautiful than any human had ever imagined it could be. But she was not sad to be leaving. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was an idea, a way of being that she carried with her wherever she went. "Ready for the next adventure?" Torres asked, joining her. "Ready," she replied. "Though I suspect this is not really the next adventure. I think this is the same adventure we've always been on. The adventure of life learning to defend itself against the forces that would destroy it." Admiral Zixthan appeared beside them, his crystal and wood form beautiful in the starlight. "My people once believed that the galaxy belonged to the strong," he said. "Now I understand that it belongs to the compassionate." The fleet began to move, reality bending around them as they prepared to jump to Andromeda. The Ocean Guardian's massive form led the way, its body stretching across space like a bridge between worlds. As they traveled, Sarah thought about the message they would carry to the Guardians of Andromeda. It was the same message that Earth's Guardians had taught them, that life was not weak, that growth was not chaos, that love was not a vulnerability to be eliminated. The universe was vast and full of dangers. There would always be forces that sought to destroy rather than create, to silence rather than sing, to bring coldness where there should be warmth. But now there was an answer to those forces. Now there were gardeners of life who could travel between the stars, carrying the seeds of hope and the songs of awakening. The last human had fallen so that something greater could rise. Humanity had died as a single species and been reborn as part of something infinite. They had learned that the end of one story was always the beginning of another. and this new story was just beginning. As the fleet disappeared into the space between galaxies, Earth continued to spin in its orbit around the sun. The Guardians who remained began the work of teaching other worlds how to awaken their own protectors. The transformation that had begun with Sarah Chen's final words was spreading outward like ripples on a cosmic pond. In the depths of space, ancient machines began to stir on 1,000 sleeping worlds. The age of the Guardians had begun, and the universe would never be the same. Life had learned to defend itself. And it would never stop growing, never stop reaching for the stars, never stop singing the songs that turned darkness into light. The children of Earth were coming home to the cosmos at last,